I'd like to call the December 20th, 2022 Board of Commissioners Business Meeting to order. This evening, we will begin with the pledge as always. And tonight, George Cressman, one of our residents, is going to lead us in the pledge.
All right, I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, George. Deanna, will you do the roll call?
Denise Hall, President.
Here?
Catherine Carter, Vice President.
Here.
Martha Similaro, Commissioner. Liz McNaney, Commissioner.
Here.
Sandra Zadell, Township Manager.
Here.
Megan Weaver, Assistant Township Manager.
Here.
Lauren Gallagher, Township Solicitor.
Here.
Isaac Kessler, Township Engineer.
here.
David Duffy, Chief of Police.
Here.
And it is noted that Commissioner Ruth Damsker, Finance Director Nate Crittenden, and Van Reeker, Zoning Officer, are absent.
Thank you, Deanna. Lauren, were there any executive sessions?
Thank you, President Hull. There was an executive session earlier this evening to discuss matters of personnel.
Thank you, Lauren. Next, we have public comments. Please state your name and if you are a resident or non-resident when you come to the mic. Thank you for respecting the 5-minute rule and practicing decorum. Our goal is to always give you the most complete and correct answers in your questions from our staff, who are experts in each of their areas. For that reason, you have the option of enclosing your email address in the registry if you would like us to reach out to you during the week with the full answer to your questions. We had some residents who were concerned that if we answered any question offline, so to speak, then the residents who wanted to hear the answer publicly would be left out. So we will continue to share the answers to questions that were posed publicly but were answered privately at the following public meeting. The following email was sent to Fred Hankin on December 19th from our manager, Sandra Zadell. Hi, Fred. I hope you are doing well. Last week, you asked at the board meeting, when did we receive the survey results? I received the verbatim responses in late April 2022. The Board of Commissioners first saw a draft of the survey presentation in early May 2022. I hope this email provides a satisfactory response to your questions. Happy holidays, Sandra. Would anyone like to make a public comment this evening? No? Okay. Moving on. Agenda item number 6 is the approval of the resolution for supplemental budget funds. Due to a financially favorable year and the American Rescue Plan, the 2022 budget will include $600,000 in spending to supplemental projects and a total of $715,000 transferred to the Capital Reserve Fund. Do we have a motion to approve Resolution 36-2022 supplemental budget funds?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Do we have any board comments? Do we have any public comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Agenda item number 13. Do we have a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding regarding police officers' 2022 comp time?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any board comments?
President Hall, you misspoke. It's agenda item number 7, just to clarify.
Oh, my goodness.
We skipped 6.
I'm really in a hurry for the holidays, so I want to cut all of them. Excuse me. Do we have a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding regarding police officers' 2022 comp time for agenda item number 7?
So moved.
Sorry, we have a motion. Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any board comments? Do we have any public comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next up, we have motion to approve the conditional offer of employment to officer candidate number 1. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any board comments? Do we have any public comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Do we have a motion to approve the conditional offer of employment to officer candidate number 2?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Do we have any board comments? Do we have any public comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Do we have a motion to approve the conditional offer of employment to officer candidate number 3?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Do we have any board comments? Do we have any public comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
President Hull?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt your awesome groove that you have going right there, but I just wanted to say that those items were not on the work session agenda, and that the reason we're not sharing the names of the officer candidates is they're still going through the process, the background checks. So at a future meeting, once they pass all of those checks, they will be sworn in probably in January.
Right, they have to be confidential until that point. Thank you for clarifying that. Next up, we have our consent items, which is a very long list this evening. Do we have a motion to approve consent items A through U? We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any board comments?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Tonight, I'd just like to, before we approve them, point out the Parks and Rec. And I know, Denise, that you had started, you thanked them for the holiday lights, but I'd like to take it a little bit further. Do you have those pictures, Megan? Sarah sent us some pictures and some more information about all that. So while we're getting into the holiday spirit by showing some of the pictures of the event, we should have some music as I thank everybody. Would you all sing while I hum Silent Night while I, so a big thank you to the Parks and Rec maintenance staff and all the decorations that they did, to John and Lori and Brian and Andrew, to Leah, Colleen, Christine, Ashton, Mike, and Cuz, who all worked the event, the North Penn and Wissahickon high school key clubs who ran the games and the crafts, and to the Parks and Rec Board and their families who volunteered, to Dan Quinby who volunteered, and it wouldn't have been such a success, of course, without the hard work of Sarah. So that's my thank you. Nice pictures, put us all in the mood even more. There was also, I think, 500 cookies, brownies, 700, 800 cookies.
750 or something
Just
crazy?
a big turnout. And the lights still look really nice out there. I see people stopping to look. So a big shout out to Sarah. Thank you. That's it.
Do we have any public comments? Deanna, will you do the roll call?
President Hall,
Aye.
Vice President Carter,
Aye.
Commissioner McNaney,
Aye.
Commissioner Similaro.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. And I would also like to thank everyone who is attending today, who is now appointed on this very long list that we have on our agenda. Thank you so much for coming today. We appreciate that. And I would like to turn it over right now to Chief Tim Dickinson, who is going to lead us in the Safe City Solutions presentation. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you for having me here tonight, and thank you for trusting us to assist you with this most important decision for your community. Do you have a clicker or right here? Okay.
You're over.
Yep.
That's good. Got it.
I got it. Okay. I'm technology challenged, so in some instances. So, yeah, so I'm Tim Dickinson. My business partner, Bill Heim, who conducts the studies with me, couldn't be here tonight. But hopefully I have all the information that you will need. There we go. So the goals of the study basically were to identify and discuss the police patrol workload and the community expectations related to police service. And then to come up with a recommended number of full-time sworn uniform patrol officer positions to meet the needs of your community. The method of our study, we conduct a review of the jurisdiction, a review of Upper Gwynedd Township, and any special service needs created within the jurisdiction. Every community has different unique factors, different risk factors within the community, depending what's in it and where it's located and who it borders. So everyone's a little bit different. So we try to identify what those are. And then we conduct a functional analysis of minimum and daily standard patrol staffing. Conduct a workload analysis using accepted methods and formulas to identify and recommend sworn full-time uniform patrol force. Again, keeping in mind, there is no universal 100%, total formula that will tell you exactly how many police officers you need. So we try to use a number of formulas, a number of different ways to try and lessen the impact of all the variables to try and come up with a realistic number. And then we also conducted a comparative analysis to provide a snapshot of how staffing and workload compares to some other similar jurisdictions. So again, determining staffing levels, functional analysis, the 3 accepted standard methods. The functional analysis is basically just a standard that tells you how many police officers you need to fill a position. The workload analysis, again, number of sworn officers needed to address the workload present in the community. And again, the comparative analysis comparing agencies and jurisdictions with each other. So before I go any further, I want you to just kind of remember a few things. I used to teach in the police academy years ago. And I remember the state curriculum, it had in the beginning when we used to teach the introduction, it said, a municipal police officer is the most visible arm of local government. So you need to think about that. While the police department's your biggest budget item, it's also your only department that's 24/7, 365. It has more contact with its citizens, its residents, its businesses than just about any other department in the township. When they want something that might really be a problem that township administration should deal with, they're going to call the police if nobody picks up the phone in here. So just keep that in mind. The other thing is, you try to run a police department like a business. Now, I always tried to run mine like a business. The only problem with running a police department is, like a business is, you don't get to pick your clients and you don't get to pick your workload. So kind of keep that in mind as well. So with a functional analysis, you have a daily standard patrol staffing number. And that for Upper Gwynedd is 1 sergeant and 3 patrol officers on duty daily. The absolute minimum is only 2 patrol officers working. And why you have a disparity there is because you have vacations, holidays, sickness, injuries, court, training, et cetera. So you have to fill those gaps. There's a lot of gaps. I won't get down in the weeds like the report gets into some of the calculations in the interest of time, but what we're trying to show in a functional analysis is using the standard to come up with how many police officers you need to cover that number of officers you want to keep out there. So looking at the fact that it takes 5 to 6 police officers to fill 1 police officer position because it's 24/7 and you have all the vacations and holidays and sick time and injuries and vacancies and et cetera. You need between 15 and 18 full-time patrol officers. That doesn't include your sergeants and management and specialists to fill those, to keep that 3 patrol officers on duty, all the time. You currently have 12, so you're really staffed to do the minimum all the time by the functional analysis. Right now, you're using supervisors and overtime to fill those gaps. Supervisors can be used to replace uniformed patrol officers, and it's commonly done, but the problem is that eventually starts to impact their administrative and daily supervisory functions and duties. And again, while overtime can be an effective method to do it, it's expensive, and especially with 12-hour shifts, at any given time, really only half your department's available to work, because the others have either already worked a 12-hour shift, or 12 hours from now, they're scheduled to work a 12-hour shift. Because any given day, any given time, half your department's off and the other half is working. So that kind of limits the number of people that are available. So 15 to 18 with the standard 5 to 6 officers to fill a position. You're now doing it with 12, but you're really, a lot of times, only filling your 2-person minimum. And just to give you an example, I got some information from Chief Duffy that's not in the report. In 2022, so your standard would be a sergeant and 3 patrol officers. 5.47% of the time this year, you've had 4 people on duty. 70% of the time this year, you've only had 2. So you've been running at your minimum 70% of the time. Last year in 2021, 6.75%, you had 4 on duty. So you're really only achieving your daily standard on a very small level. And again, part of the problem with that is you do have special situations that occur, unexpected vacancies, injuries, people retire, people quit, that you have no control over. And frankly, in my 28 years as a chief in 2 different departments, I think I was only ever fully staffed for 6 months straight. Yeah, I mean, somebody's always out, there's always a vacancy, there's always something. So that's why these numbers seem high, but you got to make up for that. Again, you can't, like a business that's having a staffing problem, a restaurant says, well, we're gonna close Monday and Tuesday, and we'll just serve meals Wednesday through Sunday. Well, the police department can't do that. It's got to be 24/7. So we have to fill those gaps. So the functional analysis, 15 to 18. So then we did the workload analysis. So one of the problems with the workload analysis is a lot of it's based on calls for service and police activity. It's counted a lot of different ways by a lot of different people, and it has a pretty big effect on the formula. So we do it 5 different ways. So we do it with total reported police activity. That includes self-initiated activity. We do a factor just on dispatch calls only, things that the officers are dispatched to. Then the IACP formula originated with the International Association of Chiefs of Police. It's been around for years, as long as I've been a police officer, and I started 43 years ago. If you don't have good call data, then you can do what they said, 0.55 calls per person, per resident population. And then what we do that's a little different is we take your risk factors, your unique things that you have in your community, and we come up with an adjusted population. For example, Merck puts 9,000 people in the township every day. So, you're not just looking at your 17,131 residents. You have Merck, you have ColorCon, you have Lehigh Valley Dairies, and a couple other big businesses that are bringing people in. And yes, not everybody works in Upper Gwynedd, so there's people leaving, but we come up with a percentage that tries to make up for all that. So that's the 0.55 calls per person adjusted. And then there's a weighted calls formula that the IACP came up with, where different calls are weighted different weights. So for example, if you have a homicide, that takes, a patrol officer up to 5 hours. So, for his part of it, his or her part of it. So that'll get a 7, whereas a barking dog call may get a 1. And we go through your calls and we come up with a, weighted formula. So we do it 5 different ways to try and take out the variables and the highs and lows to try to come up with a more reasonable number that seems to make more sense. And then under a workload analysis, we do another formula called the core service hour formula. And that factors calls for service, road miles, which is patrol time, and criminal investigation time. So we use 2019 data because the pandemic has had a great effect on police workload. It's starting to change now. We're starting to finally see going back to normal levels. But obviously, in 2020 and even 2021, things weren't quite as busy. People were home, they weren't traveling, they weren't going to work, they weren't out doing things. So we're starting to see it come back now, but we use 2019 data for that reason. Plus, the state changed how crime data is collected. So at the end of 2019, so we used 2019 because then we knew it would be more consistent. Now, the IACP formulas only determine the minimum number of patrol officers needed to handle calls and incidents. Doesn't include the chief, Doesn't include the deputy chief, the sergeants, detectives, your community, community policing specialists. It just includes patrol officers. The core service hour formula estimate includes non-supervisory criminal investigators, but does not include other specialists and your police command rank officers and the chief of police. So that all has to be factored in. And we factor in, I'll explain it a little bit, factor your sergeants in a little bit because of the nature of policing in Upper Gwynedd and the nature of policing in suburban southeastern Pennsylvania. In some Pennsylvania police agencies this size, sergeants generally provide some level of patrol service and handle calls in the absence of a patrol officer. In your case, when sergeants were available and all officers took off, sergeants would fill that gap. But again, as I mentioned before, eventually it starts to have an effect on their supervisory and leadership duties. And unlike bigger agencies where sergeants are more just first-line supervisors, in jurisdictions like Upper Gwynedd, they have a lot of administrative tasks where they're assisting the administration and the command ranks. So eventually there's a trickle-down effect that those duties get affected. Also not captured in the formulas are backup and call assistance functions, largely provided by sergeants. So what we did was you have 4 patrol sergeants. We know they have a role in filling a patrol function. So we felt it was reasonable to factor them back in, but only at a half, so that it allows then time for them to be true supervisors and do their management duties. So doing that, we took the 5 IACP formula forms and the core service hours formula. The average of the formulas equaled 17 patrol officers. You're currently at 12. We factored the sergeants back in, so we came up, that's where the 15 came from. That we recommend you should have 15 uniformed patrol officers based on the workload analysis. So then we go to the comparative analysis. This is one of the most common and simplest methods of police staffing analysis. But you got to remember, comparative only tells you what exists, doesn't tell you what you need. It only tells you what's out there. But it's useful to see similar jurisdictions and what they're doing with what they have, and so it gives you a little bit of a benchmark. But again, it only tells you what's there. These were the comparative agencies that we came up with, and it's really hard to find comparables because, like I said, every jurisdiction's different. We felt the closest were Upper Southampton and Bucks, even though they're probably the least comparable to you of the 3. Towmenson, your next door neighbor, very comparable to you. And West Norton. The populations were close. Square miles were close. Your population densities were close. You had the highest median household income, but they were close. And then the number of officers. The average number of officers, if you took the 4 agencies, you and the 3 comparables together, it averaged out to 24. Now again, remember, it only tells you what exists, not necessarily what you need. So the police officer per 1,000 population ratio, which is published by the FBI every year. This has been used by different entities, including police labor unions, to say, that's how many cops we should have. Well, no, that's not what it's telling you. That is telling you what exists. So we look at it and we put together all U.S. cities between 10,000 and 24,999, Northeast region of the country, Mid-Atlantic region of the country, Pennsylvania, total, Southeast Pennsylvania, the Common Human Service region. The reason we do it that way is police service expectations are different by different parts of the state. So, we want to compare apples and apples as closely as possible. So that's why we try to compare with the Southeast Pennsylvania, the Common Human Service region. And you can see where Upper Gwynedd is. You're at 1.3. Southeast Pennsylvania is at 1.8. The national and state average is 2 officers per 1,000 population. But again, only tells you what exists, but gives you a bit of a benchmark to see where you're at. these are the comparable communities, as you can see. You're lower than some of the comparable communities. Towamencin and you are pretty close. And you also have to keep in mind that for all we know, anyway, these comparable communities could be understaffed as well. You know, we don't know unless we did a study on each one. So what we get from that, basically, that conclusion is there's not an indication that you're overstaffed. You know, I can't say you're understaffed just from that comparable, but you're definitely not overstaffed. And then we looked at crime. So the FBI came up with a thing called the crime index. That was so you could compare larger areas to smaller areas. So what it does, it takes the crime rate per 100,000 people. And as you can see, your crime rate per 100,000 compared to Montgomery County and Pennsylvania is pretty low. That's a good thing, you know? That's a good thing. Looking at total crimes per full-time officer, looking at state and county comparison, you're low, you know? You don't have a lot of crime. That's a good thing, you know? That's a good thing. So that's not telling us that you're understaffed or overstaffed. It's just telling you that, you know, that's a good thing. When you look at the comparable communities, you can see you're in the lower range. Upper Southampton, for Part 1 crimes, which are the more serious stuff, they're the lowest. But, you know, you're right in there with them. And then you can see the Towamencin and West Norton are much higher. And you're much higher than the average in crime. But you're below the average, and that's a good thing. Crime clearance rates. Crimes are cleared when an arrest is made, or you can prove who did it, but you can't necessarily take it to court, or you prove that it didn't really happen. Your crime clearance rates, both state and county comparison and comparable communities, are very good. So that would tell you that your department's being efficient in investigating and clearing crimes. Arrests per officer. This is another interesting statistic. You're the lowest, both by state, county, and comparable community standards. So you could derive a couple things from that. You could say, well, there's no crime, so we make fewer arrests. Or with the Part 2 crimes, this is more explained in the report, but in the Part 2 crimes, a lot of them are never reported till they're discovered by the police. Drugs, DUI, disturbances, things like that. So it could mean that the police are not able to spend the time to discover these things, so they're not coming up, and therefore you're not going to have as high an arrest number. I can't give you a definitive answer why. I can only tell you what it could be. You know, you'd have to really do a much finer analysis to come up with that, if you even could. But per officer, you have lower arrest statistics. And oftentimes, it could indicate that the other workload is higher, that you don't have the proactive time to go out and make arrests. Now, this is where things change. Looking at calls per officer. And we use the 0.55 estimate, and that way there's no problem with people not reporting what a call is and what a call is not. So it takes that variable out of it. And you can see calls per officer, you're much higher than the state or the county average. Looking at the comparable communities, the same thing. You're much higher. Now, I didn't use you look at the adjusted, you're way higher for state and county. We didn't use the adjusted for the comparables because we would have to adjust theirs as well for it to be a proper comparison. But you can see you and Towamencin are very close, and much higher call volume than the other communities. That would tell me that your officers are busy. You're a service-oriented police department, you're a service-oriented community, and they're busy providing service. So what are the results? The staffing analysis methods support the need to increase the patrol staffing of the Upper Gwynedd Township Police Department. If you look at the functional, the workload, and the comparable, I think you can come to that conclusion. We certainly did. And we determined that staffing the necessary positions to handle the workload presented is best achieved by adding an additional 3 full-time patrol officers to the police department. That would bring you to 15, factoring in the sergeants as a half. You know, factoring back in 2 sergeants to allow for their supervisory time. So we would recommend that you add an additional 3 full-time patrol officers. Now, just to digress for a second with the comparables, we didn't use Lower Gwynedd because their population's much lower and their workload is their numbers are much lower. But we did just learn that they just went to 22 police officers, 22 sworn for the whole department. Yeah. So they're at the same size you are, but yet their population's much less. Now, of course, the ability to maintain a police force at a particular staffing level, that's, you know, easy to say you should go out and hire 3 cops. You got to pay for it. We understand that, you know. It is a budgeting and financial decision. It may require financial planning over a period of long-term commitment and phase-in. Recognizing the need to have a solid foundation from which to build upon that will allow the police department to better react to unexpected challenges, both operationally and employment-wise. The township is not static, and the region is not static. It's growing. There's planned development. Changes will happen on a regular basis within your department, as you've probably come to know. You'll have vacancies. You'll have injuries. You'll have, you know, spots to fill. This helps you allow to plan for those unexpected challenges. And frankly, in the current police hiring climate right now, even if you wanted to and could, you may not be able to run out and hire 3 police officers right away. You know, that meet your standards. It's getting harder and harder. I see you're very fortunate to have 3 candidates that you can start with a conditional offer. I mean, a lot of places are struggling just to get 1 candidate. And you don't want to lower your standards because, again, you know, this is the most visible department that you have in the township, and it's the highest risk. You know, it's the highest risk. So, you know, it's going to be some fiscal and administrative planning. We understand that. So we recommend that the Board of Commissioners, township staff, and the Chief of Police formulate a plan fiscally and administratively to take action steps with identifiable benchmarks to reach the recommended police officer staffing level as soon as practical. The other piece to this is as you hire, as you expand, as you get to different staffing levels, you know, not having vacancies, you should have a constant review of your department deployment operations and cost. Sometimes, you know, hiring a couple officers could have an effect on the department that you didn't anticipate, you know. So you want to look at that. Something may change in the township and you may have to take a step backwards. So we just recommend that while you make a plan to get yourselves up to 15, you also, as you're doing that, you constantly review with Chief Duffy. You do that with him. What's the impact on the department, or is the impact what we wanted to achieve? And review that as you take each step. And that's all I have. I hope I wasn't too long-winded.
Does anyone have any questions? Anyone on the board?
President Hull, I think Chief Duffy would like to say a few things.
What gives you that idea?
I just have a feeling.
Please, Chief, come on down.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, sir.
Yep.
First of all, it was a pleasure to work with Chief Dickinson on this. We spent a lot of time going back and forth. Chief Dickinson and I both experienced that sometimes our colleagues in urban areas will try to lower what the crime numbers actually are through different methods, and sometimes Chief in more rural areas will try to push their numbers up. Chief Dickinson and I worked very regularly together to get the numbers right. we wanted to make sure we had accurate data for him to work with. So we spent a lot of time on that. And just for the public's clarification, the 3 officers that were given conditional offers are not these 3. They're replacement positions that will keep us at 22. And obviously the budget's set, so spoiler alert, next year I'll come to you and recommend not all 3 at once, because like the chief said, take incremental steps, but I'll most likely recommend an additional 2, which would allow me to create a traffic safety unit with those 2 officers, not the 2 new hires, but 2 more senior officers, and address what's really our number 1 quality of life concern in the township, which is traffic, which is not a bad problem to have, instead of really serious crime or violent crime or something. So again, as the chief said, we'll take steps, and I'm really glad this study was done. Thank you.
Does anyone in the public have any questions for either of our chiefs, as we have 2 chiefs tonight? No? Okay, thank you both.
Can Chief Dickinson be excused?
Of course. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, so moving right along, Commissioner Carter does not have any other agenda items. Commissioner Carter, was there anything you wanted to add this evening? Or whatever.
I wanted to welcome our new HRC member. Did you want to say anything and say hi?
Hi, my name is Ann Kunzman, and I'm thrilled to be able to join the HRC of Upper Gwynedd Township. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.
That's it, okay. Moving on, well, and I guess before,
One more thing.
oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say thank you to the Upper Gwynedd Fire Department for their Santa Saturday. It was wonderful. I know I'm on Park Road and in West Point Village, and the kids, my neighbors' kids, all up and down the street. It was just wonderful to see them going, up the street, down the street. And then they have the new thing they started last year where you can track them on YouTube. It's amazing. It's really funny watching all the comments and people posting pictures of where they are in Gwynedd Square, Gwynedd Valley. It's really a lot of fun. So a big shout out to the Upper Gwynedd Fire Department. They had their Santa for special needs students. That was Sunday. So they came down and they had the one that signs. So they had the signing Santa. Also, this is the second year they had the signing Santa. So just a big shout out to the Upper Gwynedd Fire Department for all their hard work.
Great, thank you. And I did notice there was another individual who was recently appointed, and he also just happened to lead our pledge today. So I did also want to welcome George Cressman, who is joining our Joint Board of Appeals, which we run that with North Walesboro. So thank you for coming, George. This is George, everybody, if you don't know him. Is anyone else here tonight who was on this list? It's a long list. Okay, just making sure we didn't forget anybody. Okay, moving right along. Commissioner Damsker is absent this evening, so I will do her agenda item. This is a new land development in Worcester Township, which our sewer plant will be servicing. Our solicitor, sewer engineer, and director of wastewater treatment have all reviewed the plans and have certified our sewer plant's capacity to accept this additional flow. All comments from our sewer engineer have been addressed, and it's recommended for approval. Do we have a motion to approve Resolution 39-2022, Toll Mid-Atlantic Act 537 Plan Revision for new land development in the Zacharchuk? Sorry, I'm botching that name. Tract in Worcester Township, served by Upper Gwynedd Township Sewer. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any board comments? Do we have any public comments? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. I will now turn the meeting over to Commissioner McNaney.
Thank you. Item number 14 on the agenda is a change order for the Newport Lane Basin. Isaac, did you want to add anything? I was just going to say that when they got in there, they noticed some things with the I'm having, the outfall, the piping, and then the fence, there was problems with the, with the
Yeah, so
fence.
I guess to summarize the change order that's on the agenda here, the project itself was a retrofit of the basin as part of our MS4 program, and also just the age of the basin to bring it up to current, approaches to managing the stormwater. While the contractor was in the basin area, two things were noticed that they could help out with to repair. One was an existing corrugated metal pipe that comes into the basin and brings water from the nearby road into the basin. And also some areas of the fence that surrounds the basin, some additional areas were seen when all the brush was cleared. So it was, discussed with staff, and we thought it'd be beneficial to have the contractor repair these items while they're doing the work around the basin itself.
Thanks, Isaac.
welcome.
So I'd like to make a motion to approve the change order number 1 for the Newport Lane Basin retrofit in the amount of $15,000.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Do we have any board comments? Do we have any public comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Commissioner McNaney. Commissioner Similaro, you don't have any agenda items this evening. Is there anything you'd like to say?
Treatment Plan is doing great, thank goodness. And I just want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, Happy Hanukkah, and Happy Kwanzaa. And thank you all for coming out. It's been a great year. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Similaro. Next up in other business, we have a motion. Do we have a motion to approve the December 2022 open invoices? We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any board comments? Do we have any public comments? Deanna, will you do the roll call?
President Hall,
Aye.
Vice President Carter,
Aye.
Commissioner McNaney,
Aye.
Commissioner Similaro.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Do we have a motion to approve the December 2022 paid invoices?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any board comments? Do we have any public comments? Deanna, will you do the roll call?
President Hall,
Aye.
Vice President Carter,
Aye.
Commissioner McNaney,
Aye.
Commissioner Similaro.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Does anyone have anything else on the board?
I'd like to also wish everyone happy holidays and safe travels and enjoy your time with your family.
Great. So on behalf of the Board of Commissioners and the Township staff, I'd like to echo my fellow commissioners in extending a wonderful holiday season to all, and to all, a good night. Meeting is adjourned.